Throughout this year, we've heard from so many wonderful guests on People, Nature, Big Ideas. We've connected with people from all places and backgrounds, and across all of their stories, one thing feels so clear to me that access to nature is essential to every single one of us. And that's why TPL is working in communities across the country to protect land and build parks, especially in communities where that work is needed the most. So this holiday season, you can be a part of this critical work. When you make a gift, you're moving us one step closer to ensuring equitable outdoor access is available to all people. And if you give by December 31st, your gift will be matched for up to $250,000. Go to TPL/donate to make your contribution today. Thanks so much and happy holidays. So as the year is drawing to a close, we here at People, Nature, Big Ideas are revisiting 3 remarkable efforts that Trust for Public Land is using to connect everyone to the outdoors and to kind of reveal the deeper ties between land and community and purpose. And so this particular end of year episode features 3 segments. One is on people, one is on nature, and the final segment will be about our big ideas. And so in this segment, which we're referring to as our people segment, we're going to be heading to Dallas. And it's a city that's experiencing one of the most ambitious urban greening transformations in the country. And that is the Greener Dallas, Greater Dallas plan. And that plan's going to build about 18 new parks. It's going to develop a 17-mile urban hike and bike trail, and it's going to enhance 283 acres of protected wilderness. And it's going to improve miles and miles of nature trails. So this sounds like a place I want to be. And so one of our people at the heart of this transformation is the Mr. Ray Garvin. And Ray Garvin, you are TPL's Texas Director of Philanthropy. You've spent years building partnerships. You've been fostering lasting investments. You've been amplifying community voices in such a way that Dallas families have access to healthy outdoor spaces. And so it's an honor, sir, to have you. We're really lucky that you're here.
Oh my gosh, Rhonda, way too kind, way too nice. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being on. And, as you were doing the introduction and you talked about all these years building the partnerships and amplifying community voices and these things for Dallas families, I just, it's an honor to be able to do this job for other people in a role that 20 years from now, they don't need to remember my name, but it'd be lovely to go back and visit that park and walk that trail 20, 30 years from now.
Thinking about nature and health, we learned through a report by the Texas Trees Foundation that Dallas is heating faster than almost any other major U.S. cities. And naturally, the neighborhoods with the least parks and the fewest trees are obviously going to be those that are most impacted. And I'm wondering if you can tell me and our listeners about the ways a lack of green space show up in the daily life of residents.
Texas is a big state and Dallas is a very big city. And it is not what many would consider a walkable city because it's so large and the public transportation around the city is it's not great. There aren't a lot of railways. We have them in Dallas and there are city buses, but it's just a big place to live. So walking outside in Texas, I mean, it's almost December, Rhonda, and it was 80 something degrees a few days ago. So there is a lot of concrete. And then when you talk about areas and communities where there's been a long-standing disinvestment of green space in those communities, it really heightens the problem that we face.
Going back to a Greener Dallas, Greater Dallas, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that and about its vision. Do you mind?
Our vision is if we can make spaces greener for everybody inside of this city, we will collectively make a greater city. Essentially, that is our vision. One of the common things that we heard from people inside of the city, whether that be a newspaper, reporters, funders, volunteers, board members, they said, man, you guys are all over the place. I don't know if you guys are building parks. Are you doing trail? You're doing a little bit of everything. So we started to really think about just the messaging and the packaging of our work in this vision instead of talking about each individual thing that we do. And well, it's like TPL the trail builder or TPL the park developer. No, 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 no. What we're doing is providing green space access for everybody in the city. And if we can all share that one collective vision, even though maybe in this district or this neighborhood, the playground and the park, it looks a little different over here, or the trail extends a little further over here. It's everything works in concert with one another. So, that simple name, GD, Greener Dallas, Greater Dallas, that encompasses different elements of our work for the greater good of the people.
Community is like a sweeping term, right? But it really means there are several communities, all of the neighborhoods, all of the demographics, all of the economic realities that exist. I can only imagine the amount of engagement, the amount of investment, the amount of dialogue and even outreach. Can you share like a story or two about the Dallas community and the leadership that really helped shape the direction of the GD campaign?
Yes. And I don't want to take any credit for this. Our staff, Sophia and Caleb and Molly Morgan, when I say watching them work with people is an experience like none other, they are phenomenal at listening and engaging and hearing. A lot of times, a lot of people, they just want to be heard. And our first project, our first real true project in Dallas, South Oak Cliff Renaissance Park, the community wanted this tiny little 2-acre spot in Oak Cliff, Texas, across from the high school, sandwiched in between an educational resource center for children and a medical center. It was a spot that kids had to traverse through every day that I wouldn't let my boys step foot in. Through some of our early work here in Dallas with the office reopening in 2014, the principal of the high school called up at that time, State Director Robert Kidd, and said, "Hey, can we do something?" We listened. We engaged with the high school. We engaged with the medical center. We engaged with the educational facility and the owner of that property. And we listened with the name. They wanted the name. This is a renaissance for this community. And throughout that community engagement and working and listening, there have been so many cool things that have happened at this space that would have never have existed before, right? They won the state championship the very next year. They had their parade at that park with Trust for Public Land all over it. There's a rock climbing boulder that people in that community, in that city, have never had. We really got to see the true impact of listening to that. And South Oak Cliff Renaissance Park is just a shining example of that community engagement process.
I love that. And hearing you say that, I just want to take 2 seconds to shout out Taylor Toynes. He is a phenomenal human being, and I know that we're really proud to have him on our national board. The voice, the point of view that he brings to our national board dialogue and the direction that the organization takes is pretty impressive. So, like hat tip to Mr. Taylor Toynes as well, because he's pretty a phenomenal leader from Oak Cliff. Now, I think I heard you mention that you are up in northern Dallas, but this past year, it's my understanding that there's been momentum in southern Dallas that included the opening of the Charles R. Rose Community Park. I want to hear from you how new parks are helping address some of the inequities that have been at play in southern Dallas for decades.
It's critical. Southern Dallas is the foundation of our initiative. Dallas did a very good job in the 50s and in the 60s of what a lot of people call and coin here in Dallas the term a quiet style of racial control back then, right? It was not front and center with protests. There were deals made, there were concessions made, and a slow rollout of desegregation that kept Dallas afloat and made it appear as if it was a very equitable and progressive thinking business city, when in reality, it was sectioned off, right? So the plan that we are currently engaging in right now for Southern Dallas, we didn't come up with this. We didn't make this plan up. This plan existed since the 50s. This plan has been
It's
intact
amazing.
for the city of Dallas for over 85 years. That the trail that we're currently trying to build now, city's already got the designs. They've got the plans, but it's sat dormant for almost 86 years now. 86 years. So yes, we're in
That is
other
wild.
areas, Rhonda, but Southern Dallas is still the foundation of our initiative and our work.
When we think about TPL as an enterprise, as an organization, it should be known to everybody listening that one of our primary goals is ensuring that everyone, whether you're in Southern Dallas, Northern Dallas, or anywhere else in this country, we hope that everybody, regardless of where they live, has a park within a 10-minute walk. And I want to know from you how close Dallas is to meeting that goal and what you think it might take to get us there.
So I think we still have a ways to go. Okay. But the data shows we have come a very long way. Over the last 6, 7 years, we have improved that 10-minute walk access from about 54% to 81%.
Ooh, okay.
So
Okay.
quite a significant improvement. But I look at the peers. I look at Plano, I look at Frisco, I look at some of our surrounding cities, and they're upwards in the 90%, 93, 94%. So I look at how far we've come, and we've done a phenomenal job. And Trust for Public Land has played a very critical part in that. I want to try to increase that another 10%, over the next couple of years here.
I love that, closing that park equity gap. As I mentioned when I introduced you, you are the Texas State Director for Philanthropy. And so your role focuses on building those philanthropic partnerships. And it means that you are bringing in the capital that helps make these parks possible. And I wonder what you would convey to people so that they better understand the role of philanthropy in transforming cities such as Dallas and any place else, frankly.
Rhonda, I've actually thought about this quite a bit of late, just because of where we are as a people, as a country, as a time in philanthropy across the board. Across the board, it is tough out there. There are some real human needs that have to be met right now. Down here in Texas, there was a tragic flooding in southern Texas where a lot of
Yes.
funders are starting to say we've got to help these people out. We've got to help some of that disaster relief, and then other nonprofits literally saying if we don't get this funding, we cease to operate. Right. So
Mhm.
what I've heard and what we've experienced in Dallas is, despite the differences, there's a common theme across this city that people unify on, that nobody likes blighted property. Nobody likes vacant land that turns into places where bad things can happen. Nobody wants that. And what I tell folks is, if we don't want these things to exist, right, there are ways and there are measures for us to help clean that up, to help aid in that. That takes your support, that takes your advocacy, that takes your buy-in. A lot of times here, Rhonda, I'll be honest with you. There are some very big, attractive, sexy park projects happening in Dallas right now. I mean, parks that people would drive hours to come see, destination locations, a half acre park inside of such and such neighborhood that somebody who lives in North Dallas, who may never traverse down to the southern side, they'll never see that, right? So it is my job, it is our mission, it is our goal to show that while those big, attractive destination parks are absolutely critical to have, they serve a purpose. We can't forget about the balance. And the balance comes with focusing on the communities. At this time where we are, it is critical for support. I know a lot of people use the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure, right? We appreciate the time. We absolutely need the talent. But in order to make these things possible, the treasure box has to be unlocked. So as we continue to move forward, that support across the board for every market, for every philanthropy coordinator, director, or associate, it is important that we have that support to make this stuff possible for people.
That is just so well stated, and that is nothing but the truth. And I just want to tack on another thing for people to consider is when we are investing in others, we're not taking anything away from anyone else. And so, I don't want to simplify the importance of equitable investment, but, that phrase around lifting all boats, right? So that we can all have a quality of life and experience fullness, and we can actually thrive. There's no harm there. There's no harm in investing our resources in places and people that need them most. So thank you for putting that in such a beautiful way. So what are some examples of projects already making a measurable impact, and what do you have coming next in the future?
Oh my goodness. Where do I want to go with this one? I could use some of our schoolyards work, definitely measurable impact here. I mean, it's hot. It is very, very hot. And to be able to turn some of those playgrounds into to better used spaces for those children, definitely measurable. I'll just say this with South Oak Cliff Renaissance Park, Rhonda, we have
Mm-hmm.
already been able to show a 58% reduction and 911 calls from that
Mm.
area and surrounding areas. And because of that, and the cameras that we have installed at the park to monitor for safety, they have shown an uptick, I believe, of over 75% usage of that spot of that park since we opened it compared to what was there before. So while this is early on for us, that is a very strong data point that we continue to talk about today, because in order for people to go outside and use it, they have to feel safe. And that's what we're trying to do.
I love that. And when you invest in communities, when you invest in people, it's a way of saying, listen, you matter so much. And that's all, earlier you had said when you were talking about community engagement, like ultimately people just want to be heard. And regardless of, you wake up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, you matter and you're worth it. When you see others investing in you to kind of affirm that, you wake up a little bit differently. And you wake up a little bit differently because probably to the point you made about the reduced calls to 911, you probably slept better too. Right. And so there's just these incredible multiplier effects of those impacts that you named. And that's super inspiring. So thank you for sharing that data. I'm curious about any lessons that you've learned this year or any final calls to action for our listening audience.
I think what I've had to learn this year, and I still wrestle with it right now, but it's not about me. Of course, I've got my own personal feelings about things, about the directions that things are going within the park space in Dallas or with this and that. I've got my own personal thoughts and feelings, but ultimately, I am a steward and a conduit to the community and the voice of what the people want in these places. So it will be challenging, but I know this. I know there are enough people out there that want to see this come to fruition. So as long as we keep chopping wood, as long as we keep putting one foot in front of the other and don't stop, we will accomplish it. Sometimes you just sit back and say, what are we even doing this for? Like it's just impossible. We're getting resistance at every single angle. And then you get a call and you get somebody to say, I want to help.
Yeah.
And then you get a commitment from somebody that you didn't think would do it. And you say, you know what? That's why we just keep going.
That's right. I love it. Well, again, I thank you. I thank you so much for your time, your treasure, and your talent.
Thank you, you as well. Thank you.
In this segment, we're going to be focusing on nature. We're going south to St. Croix, visiting the Maroon Sanctuary Territorial Park in the U.S. Virgin Islands. This is a new park of over 2,000 acres of contiguous forest and coastal land. It's a sanctuary for native plant and animal species, and it also serves as a tribute to the Maroons. And the Maroons are powerful, self-liberated people who in the 19th century escaped enslavement and found sanctuary in these remote areas. So the park was also serving as a safeguard to the Cane Bay Reef and other popular coral reef dive sites. And so to talk about all of this today in a very limited amount of time, we're going to be joined by someone whose work has played a very integral role in the new Maroon Sanctuary Park. I'm going to be talking to Professor Olasi Davis. He's an ecologist, a cultural historian, he's an educator, and a longtime advocate in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Professor Davis, welcome to People, Nature, Big Ideas.
Good morning, your time, after my time.
It's nice to have you here. I always like to start out by talking about origin stories of people. And I know with you, Professor Davis, you've spent decades educating and advocating for land and people's place in it. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you got started in this work.
Well, it's a natural thing for me. My grandfather was a farmer. My great grandmother was born in 1855. She died 105. She thank God during the Danish time. And then my mother, she died 104. So they saw the history when the island was transformed from the Danish to American. So history was always in our family. And where I live in St. Thomas, I live close to the mountains. So we used to go hiking a lot, catch tadpole and frogs. And so I was part of nature. And hiking, you see terraces built in the hills in the mountain that were done by the slaves, enslaved Africans. It's something was natural and embedded in me from a child.
You know, a few of us here at TPL had an opportunity to read an article entitled Sacred Geography. You say, if you are in tune with nature, you can feel the spirits of the Maroons who once used this area as their sanctuary. And I know that a lot of people in our audience could benefit from hearing from you about the Maroons, who they are, your connection with them, and what makes this land sacred geography.
When you go to that area, you can feel the spirit, you will start to cry because there's road that these people walk on, old slave road, and you're walking on the same road where these people walk on. And when you continue hiking, you see the grave site. And we are traced some of the family members back, going back to the 1700s, and the family of the enslaved folks, some of them generation live on the island. So there's a connection. So it's a living history or a living museum.
Mm-hmm. We understand that creating this park was a really long adventure, and we know that there were a lot of pieces that had to come together to make it happen. And what we'd like to understand from you is some of the biggest obstacles that you and your colleagues and collaborators faced when you were trying to secure these 2,000 acres. And when you're facing these obstacles, we'd love to know what it is that kept you going throughout all of these years.
It started in 1983, 42 years ago. I just finished my undergraduate study, and this gentleman came to the island, a developer named Jack Jacoby, and he wanted the northwest of the island, wanted to be rezoned to build hotels. So I had the first public hearing in 1983. So, and I was in my 20s. Now I'm a half a century now. So it really started for them with a public hearing and trying to educate the public. So I strongly believe in research. So people join me, then they come out, and I being consistent. I take thousands of young people, students, people from all over the world, and companies and magazines, a lot of public hearing. What keep me going? When you see those grave sites with those deceased people there, you can't give up because they didn't give up. It was discouraging a lot of time, frustrated, just me there alone or something, just I'm fighting politically. The most challenging part was the spiritual part and your faith. And so whenever I walk that area and you hear the wind begin to blow, or you see the ocean and you see the area part, these enslaved jump over the cliff. And, like I tell the young people, women go to certain part of my own country, the cliff where they jump over. So I will ask them, if you was an enslaved person, will you let them catch you or you jump over? Everybody say, oh no, I let them catch me. But when I say, if they get catch, they will cut off your foot, they cut out your tongue, they do this to you, and then everybody begin to change. So I say, when the African jump over, the spirit got back to Africa. So it's a whole different perspective as how we look today.
I've got a couple of follow-up questions to that because while you were writing articles, you were participating and leading research. You had people coming to study the area all over the world. I know that TPL also played a role and was a
Yeah,
partner
yeah.
in moving this forward. And I know that there were other potential partners. Is there anything you can share about your relationship or experience with TPL and what
That,
that partnership included?
that's easy. When I met Melissa,
Melissa Hill,
yeah,
right?
she was a Maroon.
Ha.
She in tune with nature.
Mm.
We
Mm-hmm.
just clicked very much, and she worked hard, and we had that connection there. So now I had a partner in this whole struggle, and we get Kitty and everybody else involved in the whole process because historically the government had dropped the ball. Why I say that going back from history from the 1930s, the Department of Interior recommended to the local government to create a territorial park system. This is the 1930s and 20s, They never did. They didn't have the political will. So my time come around now, and I drop in the ball.
So, ecologically, this is some of the most intact forest that's left on St. Croix, and it's got wildlife habitat, ancient trees, rare plants, and tide pools. And for people who haven't visited, I'd love to hear from you what makes the landscape unique, and what do you see as the most urgent ecological threats that the new park must confront, especially for it to stay intact and protected.
To have a good management plan, you must follow the name. Maroon Sanctuary. What sanctuary mean? So the threat is the people themselves what they want from the park, but they must have an understanding of the history of the area. The natural part is seeing the cave, the tide pool, wildlife, endangered species, and we do have pre-Columbus sites going back before Columbus within the park. The park will even be a World Heritage Site. What makes it so unique? The geology of the area is totally different compared to the other parts of the island. Because St. Croix is not volcanic, but indirectly impacted by volcanic activity. From 80 million years ago, the island emerged. It was two islands until 20 million years ago. The ocean floor pushed up from the ocean floor and make one island. The island was also for the indigenous people as well. St. Croix was one part of the northern Virgin Islands, including Puerto Rico. And through the ice age, it's separated. So now we are on the South American plate. So the deepest part of St. Croix, guess what it is? Maroon country.
It's really important, that integrity of the place and maintaining that integrity and that purpose. When you are providing education and you are taking these young people on these hikes and you're explaining to them the history of the space, I know that as they're hearing you, they are hearing a story of resilience. You shared, would you choose to stay on the boat, or would you choose to jump? Because here's what you don't know. But when we talk about resilience and we talk about freedom and we talk about relationship with the land, I'm wondering what message you might want to send to anybody that's listening about these generations, these little ones and these ones who have yet to be born. So curious about some thoughts you have on that, about the next generations.
When you go to Maroon Sanctuary, whether or not you know about the history about the Maroons or any history, when you go there, you feel the spirit. And without having the knowledge about the area, you know that this place is special. And you hear the wind blowing in the northwest, the wildlife, and you listen carefully at night, especially there at night hiking and the moonlight. This place is very special. It's a living history for people here.
I'd love to close there, and that is, as we're thinking about the generations that are coming behind us, for them to remember that we work with nature and not against nature, and for them to understand that nature does have the answers and we need to protect it in order for us to protect ourselves as well.
We are
Mm-hmm.
responsible for the wildlife in the forest, animals, and for the historical structures because those structures were from your ancestor. That's
Mm-hmm.
our responsibility, not to destroy it, but to maintain those and to embrace and to restore. I think when we do that, you continue the legacy of these people.
Mm-hmm.
for many generations. They could come by and touch a sugar mill or this and say that 400 years ago, this was built by my ancestors and so forth.
Mm-hmm. There's so much to learn, and I just feel like the time is right. So thank you for joining us here on People, Nature, Big Idea, Professor Olasi Davis.
You just said Bushman be fine.
Okay, Bushman. I have got Trust for Public Lands Chief Program Officer, Jeff Danter. He is one of my favorite people at TPL, I gotta say. And we've been colleagues and friends for about 5 years now. I will share very publicly in an unscripted way. We have a special bond around Bad Brains, one of the best bands to walk the face of this earth. But what I really do value about Jeff is his knowledge. He's got a lot of heart. He's got a lot of enthusiasm for this work. And, he's really true to the notion that we have at TPL, where we say we are the joyful ambassadors of the outdoors. So, Jeff, let me just say welcome to People, Nature, Big Ideas.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. It's long-time listener, first-time caller, and it's been such a pleasure to work with you these last few years. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
This has been quite a challenging year for a multitude of reasons, and it's also been a year of significant resilience. And so I'm going to ask you to help me and all of our listeners unpack a lot of the heaviness and a lot of the bright spots. So we always try to find that balance, right? You ready for that?
I am, but before we start, you just returned from a big backpacking trip in Arizona. How did it go?
It was an incredible experience. I was out in the Arizona desert for 5 days with some powerful women. And before I go further, I do have to shout out Marcy and Tia. They were our guides from a business called Backcountry Found. I couldn't recommend a better team for a truly safe and joyful experience. I was in Paria Canyon, which is located in the Vermilion Cliffs Wilderness in Arizona. It's over like 112,000 acres of protected public land, which I learned that protection came into being when it was passed by Congress in 1984. So it kind of feels really fitting for this conversation. It's almost like I planned it to work out this way. On this trip, it was all women, our guides, my friends, and 2 of my friends were backpacking for the very first time. So when we told them what we were doing, I was like, this is going to be your maiden voyage. I mean, we were in water that was waist deep. We were in mud that was waist deep. We had quicksand. We had free climbing. We had a lot of bouldering. It was mostly all women of color, which I also valued.
Fantastic.
Paria Canyon, Arizona, Backcountry Found. Go there, do it, do your homework, do the training. It was incredible.
Well, that's good. I love that Vermilion Cliffs area and Lee's Ferry, and this time of year, it's just a spectacular place to be. So sounds like a great trip.
You have devoted your career to protecting public lands. I mean, it's been decades long. And I'm curious about why these places matter so much to you personally, why you are so committed to the mission of TPL, and how you stay motivated all the time.
Well, it's not hard to stay motivated when you get to do this kind of work. I think at the simplest level, public lands include so many different things. They include deep wilderness, like where you were this past weekend, but it can be a trail through a neighborhood, it can be a schoolyard, it can be a local park. They are really important to the fabric of America. And in a sense, they are essential infrastructure for the country. It's places where people can come together to restore, to play, to walk, to recreate, to meet each other. And in a way, they really strengthen our communities. They strengthen our mental health, our public health. When we invest in public spaces, when we invest in public lands, we're really investing in communities. And we get a return on that investment. Studies have shown that investing in local parks returns tenfold that investment in terms of health outcomes alone. And of course, the economies that swirl around public parks always generate economic uplift for those communities. So, it's really not a hard sell for me to get to do this kind of work because I feel so strongly that we're building the communities of the nation.
Because I'm just fresh back from my trip last night. The opportunities we had to explore the petroglyphs that were there, when we had
It's
an
awesome.
opportunity to kind of reimagine what the messages were that were being conveyed and trying to determine, like, what does this symbol mean here? And it was so special because no matter what happens anywhere in this nation, those are things that cannot be erased. And so they are literally imprinted upon these mountains, imprinted upon these rocks, and it gives you an opportunity to pause and realize the significance of space and how historic these locations are. And then you're having conversations with your friends and even strangers that you've never had before because of this documentation, you know?
Human relationship with land and space has always been part of the human experience. Let's do the wonky part. Nearly all Americans, regardless of public party, they want more public lands. And the polling shows this again and again. 71% of Americans oppose the sale of public lands, both parties. 74% of Americans oppose closing national parks. Everybody wants to be able to go to the national parks. 73% of Americans oppose firing federal park employees. If you needed to get permits, federal employees actually process those permits. They do the work that allows us to access those lands. And it's not just the polling. Americans vote for public lands. In the 2024 election, Trust for Public Land ran 23 ballot initiatives where voters could choose to tax themselves to support local parks. And all 23 of them passed. For example, in Clay County, Florida, which Trump won with 69% of the vote, 72% of voters supported a public lands bill to tax themselves to create more public lands. And in California, which Harris won easily, voters passed more than $10 billion in conservation bonds. So everybody loves parks and open space. And in this sort of fractured time we live in, they really shouldn't be part of the culture wars because public lands are an American value. They're not a political value.
We've seen record visitation in public lands. We've seen a record demand for places to get outside. And at the same time, there's a lot of real headwinds from the federal funding cuts that have happened. When we talk about the state of public lands right now, how do you describe it?
If you think about 2025, it's really been a year of contrasts. On the one hand, more and more people are finding their way to the outdoors. And it started in 2020 during COVID when we found that visitation in parks, whether they were national parks or local parks, was just skyrocketing. And it hasn't fallen back. Those trends of visitation continue to grow. And on the other hand, as you mentioned, there's real uncertainty in the public land space because federal support is lagging now. But programs like the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is the money that the federal government uses to acquire land for parks and national forests and national wildlife refuges, it comes from royalties on leases of offshore oil, so it's not tax money. But it has been under fire from this administration who's looking to cut costs. The Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership has been delayed and maybe reduced. That's federal money that goes to local and state governments for the investment in local parks. The National Park Service faces over $1 billion in proposed budget cuts, 900 million of that just in their operating budget. So that's fewer park rangers, fewer people at the gate, fewer people cleaning campgrounds and those sorts of things. And as we record this, and you may not know this happened while you were in the backcountry. As we record this, the administration has filed a court-ordered plan. They intend to lay off 2,000 employees from the Department of Interior. That's approximately a 20% cut. In addition, federal cuts impact local communities. We talked about how Trust for Public Land works to pass these local ballot initiatives, many times that money are matching funds for federal funds to then really build out trails and parks at the local level. So all of this means fewer staff, deferred maintenance, less access, exactly at the moment when we see the use of parks, people visiting parks increasing. I don't want it to all be negative. There are plenty of silver linings. Earlier in the podcast, you had a conversation with Professor Olassie Davis about the Maroon Sanctuary in St. Croix. I mean, this is a story of sort of conservation resilience, right? Where all these obstacles were overcome. There are stories like that, and Trust for Public Lands and our colleagues across the conservation movement are notching wins. When federal funds are pulled from local projects like 5 Mile Creek Greenway in Dallas, which you discussed earlier, we have to keep grinding to try to find those funds, to fill those gaps, to keep this work moving forward. As I said at the top, these are investments in communities, and we have to find ways to continue to make those investments so that we can grow this cultural asset in America.
And even when things are kind of frozen at the top, communities keep finding creative ways to protect what matters most. And so with this theme around silver linings and with all of those headwinds and the point that TPL closed those 22 federally funded land protection projects, there's likely more to come, and that's exciting. And so thinking about these wins, I think you've got quite a few that you could mention. And I appreciate you taking the time to kind of read some of these off because they are significant and they're also very well dispersed throughout the country. So what stands out to you?
Yeah, so you're right. This year, Trust for Public Land has closed 22 federal land acquisitions. These are lands that will go into national parks and national forests of the federal government. That's about $82.5 million worth of land that we've acquired and transferred to the federal government. But we've done some really exciting projects this year. In Vermont, we acquired the White Rocks Gateway, which expands access to the Appalachian Trail, as well as protects forests and wildlife corridors and provides lots of outdoor recreation. In Utah, we acquired land along the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. And working with the Utah delegation, we've advanced bipartisan legislation in Congress to designate this a national scenic trail. In Arizona, we added 47 acres to Saguaro National Park. And this is part of a multi-year effort to close gaps in Saguaro National Park. Understand that many of our public lands have private inholdings, and these inholdings are not particularly good for wildlife habitat. They certainly make it more difficult to recreate on these lands. And probably most importantly, they make it very difficult for public servants, Park Service employees to manage these lands in the most efficient way possible. So that was a huge win. We've protected over 2,000 acres acquired in holdings in Saguaro National Park alone. In California, we partnered with the Potter Valley Tribe and the U.S. Forest Service to establish the Pomo Community Forest, a community forest that will serve that tribe. In Oregon, we recently closed on 3,100 acres at Tualatin Mountain Forest. This is a partnership with Oregon State University. These lands will be open to the public, but they'll also be used for education at Oregon State and as a research facility, training young people how to be better land managers. So there's a lot to celebrate. And as you say, there will be a lot to celebrate in the future, but all of us need to keep grinding away to make sure that we make these opportunities into real results.
We're going to wrap up. You've been doing this for a while, as I mentioned, and you have seen the organization, I think, inhale and exhale. We grow and we expand, and then maybe we just kind of take a beat, and we are constantly evolving. I see us trying to emulate water in natural spaces, right? We recognize sometimes we got to go over here, we go over the rock, we'll turn into a little eddy over here. We try to move like water, and I'm grateful for that. We also need to have some big ideas. And so I'm curious what you think the next big idea might be for Trust for Public Land.
You know, I think we all realize that Americans are more divided than we have been in a long time, at least in my lifetime. This past spring, the Trust for Public Land conducted a study that found that equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats visit local parks in very large numbers. And nearly 2/3 of the people in the survey reported that they had had a positive interaction with a total stranger in the park. This is a really powerful point. Being on public land is an act of community building. Whether you're joining a group of novice hunters in Minnesota or vacationing to see the Maroon Sanctuary on St. Croix, whether you're walking with a mom's group on the 5 Mile Creek Greenway in Dallas or gathering traditional plants as part of the Penobscot Nation in Maine, you're participating in an act of profound pro-social activity. Trust for Public Land is leaning into that community building aspect of our work. In a divided, lonely America, public land is a unifier. And it may sound really naive, but maybe public land is where we start to rebuild our civil society. This is the hopeful vision of our work. I'm looking forward to seeing how far we can take this idea of community building and run with it over the months and years ahead to see if we can really sort of reclaim those public spaces and those public ideals that we built this country on.
I think that's a good note to end on. It's a positive note. And I just want to say, I'm really glad you're here, Jeff. You do stay steady and your heart is very true and it's big and you stay enthusiastic. And so thank you for giving us some of your time and your knowledge today.
Well, thank you, Rhonda. I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate all that you do. And this is the year-end version of the podcast. So let me just say how much I'm looking forward to working with you in 2026.
Before we go, I want to remind folks that this is the holiday season and you all can be part of this critical work. And so if you're able to make a gift, you can move TPL one step closer to ensuring equitable outdoor access for all people. And if you're able to contribute before the year ends on December 31st, your gift will be matched up to $250,000. Go to TPL/donate to make your contribution today. Thanks so much and happy holidays.